संसारधावा नललीडलोका त्रणय कारुण्य घन घनत्वम्
Tasya kalyana gunaravasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravind Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nitya Gita Aditya Madhyam Manasurasena
Shrutaranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam
Romanchakam Pasutaranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam
Shri Vigra Aradhana Nitya Nana Shrungaratan Mandir Marjanado
Shri Vigraharadhana Nichanana Shingaratan Mandira Majinado
Yuktasya Bhaktam Chanuyunjatopi Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam
Yuktasya Bhaktam Saniyunjatopi Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam
Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasado Swadanna Triptan Haribhakta Sangam
Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Swadanna Triptan Haribhakta Sangam
Krutvaiva Triptim Bhajata Sadaiva Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam
Kitaiva Triptim Bhajata Sadaiva Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam
Shri Radhika Madhayorapara Madhurya Leela Gunarupanam Nam
You want to do Nishingadev?
Shri Radhika Madhayorapara Madhurya Leela Gunarupanam Nam Pratikshana Swadana Lolupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Nikunja Yuno Ratikeli Siddhai Yayali Vir Yuktir Apekshaniya Nikunja Yuno Tatra Didaksha Vallabhasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Tatra Didaksha Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Sakshadarittvena Tamasta Shastre Yuktastatha Bhagat Eva Shadvi Sakshadarittvena Kintu Prabhurya Priya Eva Tasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Kintu यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादात् न गति कुतोऽपि यस्य यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादात् न गति कुतोऽपि यस्य कुतोऽपि ध्यायन्तु वांस्तस्या यशस्त्रीसंज्ञां वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दं नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी नितिनामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद
चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda
Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda
Hare Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavrinda
Hare Krishna Rama, Hare Hare, Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Haribol, Prabhu. Your wife wants to do Damodarasthan. Oh, okay. One of the ladies, Rasavati, you want to do? Yeah.
Namamishvaram Sakchid Anandarupam Lasat Kundalam Gokule Brajamanam
Namamishvaram Satchidanandarupam Lasat Kundalam Gokule Bhajamanam
Yashoda Biyulukhaladhavamanam Paramistam Atyantato Drutya Gopya
Abhiyolukalananam Paramistam Atyantato Drutya Gopya
Rudanta Muhunetra Yugmam Rajantam Karam Bhoja Yugmena Satanka Netram
Rudanta Murnetram Yugman Vijatam Karambujam Yugmena Satankanetram
Muhu Swasakam Patri Rekanta Kanta Stita Graivam Damodaram Bhakti Badham Ete Diksvalila Bhir Ananda Kunde Swagosham Nima Jantam Akhyapayantam
Yalila Birnanta Kunde Swagusam Nimaya Jatam Akhyapayantam
Tadiye Shitajeshu Bhakta Jitatvam Puna Prematastam Satavriti Vande
Siddhaite Chitatvam
Varam Deva Moksham Na Mokshavadim Va Nachanya Vaneham Vare Sadapiha
Anam Deva Mokshama Mokshavadim-va Nachanya Viniham Vadinatadiya
Idam Deva Purnatha Gopala सदा में मनस्य विरस्तम के मने
Yam de gunata balam manasayan
idam te mukham bhojam atyant nile vratam kuntale stigdharate shagopyam
Yam de gumabayam gajanile
चुंबितम बिंबरता धरा में मनस्य विरस्तमलं लक्ष्य लाभे
Pitam
नमो देव दामोदर अनंत विष्णु प्रसीद प्रभु दुख जलाभिमग्नम्
Vishnu
के पदिस्ति विज्ञाति दिनं बतानु गृहाणि क्षमामज्ञमिद्यक्ष दृश्या
Yasti Nigambatanu Yane Samamajam Ediyakshi Krishna
कुबेरात्मजो बद्धमुत्यैव याद्वा त्वया मोचितौ भक्ति भाजो कृतौ च तथा प्रेम भक्तिं स्वकाम्य प्रयाच्छ न मोक्षे ग्रहो मे स्थितामुदरेह
Dema Pakim Swakamai Vayacha Sitamudareya
नमस्ते स्तु धाम्ने स्तुरदीप्ति धाम्ने त्वदीय धाराय था विश्वस्य धाम्ने
Imanam Vitsavinayajirage Yadayayata Vishwashadame
नमो राधिकायै त्वदीय प्रियाय नमो नन्तलीलाय देवय तुभ्याम्
Jayanti Jaya 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 Namo Nanta Lilaya Devaya Tubhya
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
जय राधा दामोदर राधे जय यशोदा मैया जय यशोदा मैया जय यशोदा मैया जय यशोदा मैया वृंदावन धाम, जय वृंदावन धाम। जय राधा नीला माधव, राधा नीला माधव राधे।
Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Radhe.
जय जगन्नाथ, जय जगन्नाथ, जय बलदेवा, जय सुभद्रा। जय सीताराम लक्ष्मण भक्त हनुमान, जय सीताराम लक्ष्मण भक्त हनुमान। निताय गौरांगा, निताय गौरांगा, निताय गौरांगा गौर हरे। जय सच्चिनंदन, जय सच्चिनंदन, जय सच्चिनंदन गौर हरे। निताय गौर हरि बोल, हरि बोल, हरि बोल, निताय गौर हरि बोल। जय जय प्रभुपाद, 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद।
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
जय जय गुरुदेव, 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 जय जय गुरुदेव।
Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev.
नमस्ते नरसिंहाया
Narasimhaya
प्रह्लादलाददायिने
Praladadadayane
हिरण्यकशिपूर्वक्षः
Ranyakashipurvaksha
शीलटङ्कानकालाये
Shilatam Kalakalaye
द्यो नरसिंहा परतो नरसिंहा
Ito Nishinha Bharado Nishinha
यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंहा
Nitato Nishinha
बाहि नरसिंहा हृदये नरसिंहा
Hare Nishinha Hidaye Nishinha
सिंहादिं शरणं प्रपदे
Namadim Saranam Pade
तव करकमलवरे नाकाम् अद्भुतशृङ्गा दालिका हिरण्यकशिपु तनुभृङ्गा केशवदीता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे, जय जगदीश हरे।
Vakar Kamala Bare Nakam Varuda Singam Alita Hiranya Kashipu Tanubingam Keshavarita Hari Rupa Jai Jagadesha Hare, Jai Jagadesha Hare, Jai Jagadesha Hare.
केशवधृता नरहरि रूपा जय जगदीश हरे, जय जगदीश हरे, जय जगदीश हरे।
Keshavajita Narari Rupa Jaya Jagadesha Hare, Jaya Jagadesha Hare, Jaya Jagadesha Hare.
जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह।
Singha Jai Jaya Narasingha Jai Jaya Narasingha Jai Jaya Narasingha Jai.
जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय भक्त प्रहलाद।
Bhakta Prahlad Jaya Bhakta Prahlad Jaya Bhakta Prahlad.
जय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल, निताय गौर हरि बोल।
Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol.
जय जय गुरुदेव गुरुदेव गुरुदेव, जय जय गुरुदेव।
Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev.
जय जय प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद, जय जय प्रभुपाद।
Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada.
जय नृसिंह भगवान की जय, प्रहलाद महाराज की जय।
Vrindaye Tusidevaya Priyaye Keshavasya Cha Vishnu Bhakti Paridevi Satyarataya Namo Namaha. Vrindaye Tusidevaya Priyaye Keshavasya Cha Vishnu Bhakti Paridevi Satyarataya Namo Namaha. Vrindaye Tusidevaya Priyaye Keshavasya Cha Vishnu Bhakti Paridevi Satyarataya Namo Namaha. Vrindaye Tulsi Devi Maharani ki jai.
Namo Namaha Tulasi Krishna Preyasi. Namo Namaha
Tulsi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha.
Radha Krishna Prema Pao Ye Abhilashi.
Radha Krishna Seva Pava E Abhilasi.
Radha Krishna Seva Pao Ye Abhilashi.
Radha Krishna Seva Pava Hey Abhinasi
Radha Krishna Seva Pao Yahi Abhilashi
Radha Krishna Seva Pava Hey Abhinasi
हे तुम्हारा शरण लो तारा वंश पूर्ण हो
Tomar sarana loy Tara mancha purna hoy
ये तुम्हारा शरण लो तारा वंश पूर्ण हो कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावन वासी
Vitara vare Vrindavana vase
मोरा ये अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास
Mora e avilas Vilasa kunja diyova
नयने हरिबो सदा जुगल रूपरासी
Nayane Nivasada Yugalaruparasi
एई निवेदन धरो सकीरनुगत करो
Hey Nivedena Gara Sakiranunata Gara
सेवाधिकारो दियो करो निज दासी
Seva Adi Gora Diye Gora Nija Dasi
दीना कृष्ण दासी कोई न मोरा होय
Dina Krishna Dasi Ko Hey Namora
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा नवासी
Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sadayena Vasi
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा नवासी
Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sadayena Vasi
यानी कानि जपा पानि ब्रह्म हत्याधिकानि च तनितानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
Yani Chapa Pani Brahmahatyadikani Cha Tani Tani Vanisante Pade Pade
यानि कानि जपा पानि ब्रह्म हत्याधिकानि च तनितानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
Yani Kani Chapa Pani Brahmahatyadikani Cha Tani Tani Vanisante Valakshana Pade Pade
यानि कानि जपा पानि ब्रह्म हत्याधिकानि च तनितानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
Yani Kani Chapa Pani Brahmahatyadikani Cha Tani Tani Vanisante Valakshana Pade Pade
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
Shri Krishna Preyasi Namo Namah
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाओ यही अभिलाषी राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाओ यही अभिलाषी
Radha Krishna Seva Pava Hey Avilasi
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाओ यही अभिलाषी
Radha Krishna Seva Pava Hey Vilasi.
Namo Namaha Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha
Shri Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha.
तुलसी महारानी की
Vindai Tulsi Deva Piyaye Kesavasya Cha Vishnu Bhakti Padi Devi Satyvrata Namo Namaha. Vrindaye Tulsi Deva Piyaye Kesavasya Cha Vishnu Bhakti Padi Devi Satyvrata Namo Namaha. Vrindaye Tulsi Deva Piyaye Kesavasya Cha Vishnu Bhakti Padi Devi Satyvrata Namo Namaha. Vrindaye Tulsi Devi Maharani Ki Jai. Putrisi Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Guru Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desires to attain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you as his wish is fulfilled. Bestowing your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My
desire that you should give me residence, pleasure, grove, Sri Vrindavan Dham. Thus within my vision of always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of redemption bride. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make your own than servant. For the Father of the Lord is serving Krishna praise. May I always swim in love with Shri Radha and Govinda. Shrimati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Kestakam Ki Chaito Darpanam Arjanam Bhavamada Vanivapanam Shri Akari Vachandika Vitaranam Vidya Vadhu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipadam Purnamrita Shradanam Sarvatmasnam Parampara Vijayati Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Vaudha Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatra Pitani Amita Smarane Nakala Ita Drishita Bhakipaya Bhagavan Mamapi Durdhaiva Midrishamya Janina Nuraga Trinarapi Sunichena Tarorapi Saishnuna Amani Namanadina Kirtaniya Sada Hari Nadhanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavitam Vajagari Shaka Maye Mama Janmani Janmanishwari Bhavata Bhakti Rahaitu Kitwai Ainandatanu Karam Paritamam Vishame Bhavam Buddho Kripaya Tavapar Pankajastitaduli Sadrisham Vichintaya Nayanam Galorashrudharaya Vadanam Gadagadarudaya Gira Purakairin Chitam Papukara Tavanama Neva Visati Jugaitam Nimishena Chakusha Prabhusaitam Sunyaitam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Verayename Aslishva Padaratam Pinastumam Adarshana Marmatam Karotuva Jata Tathava Viradatulam Poto Matprananatastu Saivana Para Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Kestakam Ki Jai. Namo Mahavaranayo Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratvishe Namah. Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life, repeated birth and death. The Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large. God is praised, raised the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which all is anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds, millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all transcendental energies. There is not even hard and fast rule for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once we chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, think of oneself a Lord on strewn street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your cause to devote some service birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yes, some or rather, I'm falling in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes will be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up? Will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and it shall remain so, even if he sunders me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted, but not be present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shri 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 Kyastakam Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1. To blaspheme devotees who dedicate their life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. Consider names of the demigods of Shiva and Lord Brahma to be cultural independent of the name of Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the order of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic literature or literatures and pursuits of Vedic version. 5. To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. Give some interpretation on the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord. 8. To consider chanting Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are offered Vedas, spiritual activity, karma kanda. 9. To instruct the faithless person about the glories of holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting of holy name and maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions in this matter. It
It's
is
also an offense to me to tell
chanting
about
while
chanting.
chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against the stand references in order to quickly achieve the desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto the Vaishnavas, devoted to the Lord. They are just like desire trees, they can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls.
Vanchakalpatirabhyascha kripasindubhyevicha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Vaishnava Thakur Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vasudaya Bhuti Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityananda Namaste Saraswati Guruvani Pracharine Devi Sesa Sunni Itai Guru Premanandi Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai. So tomorrow we'll begin to recite all our mantras again, but today we'll hear directly from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 7, text number 36. Kalena Milita Diyam Avam Rishyanrinam Stoka Yusam Swanigamo Patadura Para Aviritas Tvanayugam Sahi Satyavatyam Vedadrumam vitapaso vibhajisyati sma.
Vedam Brahmam Vitapaso Vibhajatisma.
Kalena, in course of time, milita diyam, of the less intelligent persons, avamrishya, considering the difficulties, nrinam, of humanity at large, stoka ayusam, of the short-living persons, swanigama, the Vedic literatures compiled by him, bata, exactly, durapara, greatly difficult, avirhitaha, having appeared as, two, but, anuyugam, in terms of the age, sa, he, the Lord, he, certainly, satyavatyam, in the womb of Satyavati, Vedadrumam, the desire tree of the Vedas, Vitapasa, by division of branches, Vibhajisyati, will divide, Sma, as it were. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The Lord himself, in his incarnations as the son of Satyavati, Vyasadeva, will consider his compilation of the Vedic literatures to be very difficult for the less intelligent persons with short life, and thus he will divide the tree of Vedic knowledge into different branches according to the circumstances of the particular age. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Herein, Brahma mentions the future compilation of Srimad Bhagavatam for the short-lived persons of the Kali age. As explained in the first canto, the less intelligent persons of the age of Kali would be not only short-lived, but also perplexed with so many problems of life due to the awkward situation of the godless human society. Advancement of material comforts of the body is activity in the mode of ignorance, according to the laws of material nature. Real advancement of knowledge means progress of knowledge in self-realization. But in the age of Kali, the less intelligent men mistakenly considered a short lifetime of 100 years, now factually reduced to about 40 or 60 years, to be all in all. They are less intelligent because they have no information of the eternity of life. They identify with the temporary material body existing for 40 years and consider it the only basic principle of life. Such persons are described as equal to the asses and bulls. But the Lord, as the compassionate Father of all living beings, imparts unto them the vast Vedic knowledge in short treatises, like the Bhagavad Gita, and for the graduates, the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Puranas and the Mahabharata are also similarly made by Vyasadeva for the different types of men in the modes of material nature. But none of them are independent of the Vedic principles. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The Lord himself, in his incarnation as the son of Satyavati, Vyasadeva, will consider his compilation of the Vedic literatures to be very difficult for the less intelligent persons with short life, and thus he will divide the tree of Vedic knowledge into different branches according to the circumstances of the particular age. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So the age of Kali, or Kali Yuga, the age of hypocrisy and quarrel, is a most difficult time for people because the whole culture is organized to forget Krishna. The culture is how people do things. So, for example, how do they eat? Well, in Vedic times, most people, refrain from eating meat, fish, and eggs and other things like that. But today, people are very crazy about eating meat and fish and eggs and so forth. And so culture is how people do things. And if they do things against the principles of Sanatana Dharma, or let's call it prescribed duties given by Krishna and the acharyas, then they're living basically sinful lives. And all those sins accumulate and crush people with continual litany of problems. And eventually people are defeated by all these problems. One example would be Gandhi. Gandhi never really followed the Vedic path properly. Obviously, he eclectically chose different things, like from Jainism and from the Vedas and from Islam and this and that. He put together a hodgepodge of criterions for himself. So he was, many times in his life, living like a yogi, dressing like a yogi or like a pundit, but his actions belied his appearances. So we don't have to go into all those details, but the point is, unless people actually follow the Vedic Dharma correctly. Now, what does Dharma mean? Dharma basically means your occupational duties, how you do things, and what you must do and what you must not do. So Sanatana Dharma are those duties that you must do eternally. That's why they use the word Sanatan before Dharma. And then just Dharma by itself is how people do things according to whatever influences they have in their life, goodness, passion, or ignorance. So the ignorant people, they will kill animals and eat them and have long recipes of how to cook the meat and do this and do that. It's very disgusting. And you go on the internet, you'll see all these videos of how to cook different types of meat. So that is a bit of ignorance. However, you can also find out how to prepare prasadam for the pleasure of Krishna. So we see there are many contrasts of culture, and there are culture, let's say, wars also. So the Sanatana Dharma is the culture for people who attain immortality or eternal life. So this is one thing that is not taught in school. They don't teach kids in school that you can have eternal life. Have they ever taught you anything like that? No. They ignore it completely. And they believe that you can live 40 or 60 or 80 or 100 years, and all during that time you engage in different types of sense gratification. So this is what Prabhupada says here. He says, advancement of material comforts of the body is activity in a mode of ignorance according to the laws of material nature. Now, there's a very important point. There are laws of material nature, just like there are laws of the United States government and that you have to follow, and there are laws of the state of Washington that you have to follow, and there are rules and regulations if you work for this company or that company. So there's a whole cascade of laws that we have to follow. But the laws of the universe established by Krishna, people ignore them. And they pay attention to the other laws. But the most important laws they ignore completely, because they don't accept that there is such thing as eternal existence in the spiritual world. This is like making halva with salt instead of sugar. Say, in other words, they pull out from knowledge everything that's essential, and they throw in a whole bunch of junk that's not essential at all and just misleads a person and makes them waste this human life, which is meant specifically for self-realization. It's not meant for self-indulgence. So, therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, it explains what is knowledge. See, in the 13th chapter, verses 8 to 12. So, why does Bhagavad Gita do that? Because you have to understand what is knowledge and what is junk. What will fill your mind with nonsense things that will simply take you away from Krishna rather than bring you toward Krishna. And unless we understand what is real knowledge, we remain ignorant and will be fooled to studying all kinds of things that mislead us and cause us disaster in our life. Disaster. Disaster means complete failure in this human life, right? The purpose of human life is to understand the most important relationship we can have, and that is with Krishna. Otherwise, trying to understand all the other relationships will be falsified. Unless we understand first our relationship with Krishna, all the relationships will be false. They'll be wrongly indulged in. So, in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, verses 8 to 12, it says, Amanitvam adamidvam ahimsa santirajavam acharya pasmam socham stayam atma vinigraha indriyate savairagam anahankara evacha janramityu jaravya di dukadosana darshanam asaktirana visvamga putra dara grihadisu nityam cha samachitatva istan isto papadisu maichananya yogena bhaktir avyabhicharine vivikta desa sevitam aratir jana samsadi adhyatma gyana nityatvam tattva janartha darshanam etaj jnanam iti proktam agyanam yad ato nyata. Everybody should memorize this. You should learn this, that this is what real knowledge is. And anything besides this, it says, etaj jnanam iti proktam agyanam yad ato nyata. Anything beside these 18 points is ignorance. Anything beside these 18 points is ignorance. That's what Krishna says when he says, etaj jnanam iti proktam agyanam yad ato nyata. All these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever there may be, is ignorance. So unless we get this into the mind clearly, we're going to waste our whole life studying ignorance rather than studying knowledge. And we waste our life like that. We lose the chance to go back to Godhead, to eternal life, and we continue in the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. So it's very interesting to hear what are these 20 points of knowledge. This is also explained in Ishopanishad Mantra 10, where it says, Anyad evahur vidyaya, anyadahur vidyaya, itisu shrumadiranam, yenastad vichachakshire. So you have it in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, 8 to 12, and you have it in Ishopanishad Mantra 10. And in Mantra 10 it says, the wise have explained that one result is derived from the culture of knowledge, and that a different result is obtained from the culture of ignorance or nescience. This is an amazing verse. In other words, it actually explains here what happens if you develop real knowledge and what happens if you develop the junk knowledge. And it says, Prabhupada says in a purport, as advised in chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, 8 to 12, one should culture knowledge in the following ways. Point number 1, one should become a perfect gentleman and learn to give proper respect to others. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Or, as it says, amanitvam. What does amanitvam mean? Well, according to translation in the Bhagavad Gita, it means humility. But when you read the Ishopanishad, it adds a little more flavor to that word, humility. It says that one should become a perfect gentleman or a perfect lady and learn to give proper respect to others. So when you're a humble person, you naturally give proper respect to others. You respect them and do not deal with them in an, let's say, an unsavory way. This is actually real humility. This is a point that's very important. Knowledge begins with humility. In other words, if one develops knowledge but doesn't have humility, they don't really have knowledge. They're actually just pretending to have knowledge. Humility is the number one point of knowledge. And to understand humility, you have to respect others. Well, this is connected to the teachings of Lord Chaitanya also. It says that one should be more humble than the straw in the street, more tolerant than the tree, ready to offer all respect to others, and thus one can become Sadahari, able to chant Hare Krishna all the time without any stoppage, if you do these things. So we see there's a very strong connection between Bhagavad Gita, Ishopanishad, and Shiksastakam. And the most important thing, as far as knowledge goes, is humility, learning to offer proper respect to others. That includes animals, insects, birds, everybody, demigods, and of course, Krishna. Then the second point, Manivam Adamitvam. So in the Ishopanishad it says, one should not pose himself as a religionist simply for name and fame. And Bhagavad Gita it says, pridelessness. Well, there's a long explanation of humility and pridelessness. So let's read what humility means according to the purport of Srila Prabhupada. As for knowledge outlined here, the items may be analyzed as follows. Humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. The material conception of life makes us very eager to receive honor from others, but from the point of view of a man in perfect knowledge, who knows that he is not this body, anything, honor or dishonor, pertaining to this body is useless. One should not be hankering after this material deception. People are very anxious to be famous for their religion, and consequently sometimes it is found that without understanding the principles of religion, one enters into some group which is not actually following religious principles, and then wants to advertise himself as a religious mentor. In other words, a guru, but actually a religious tormentor. They just torment people with nonsense. As for actual advancement in spiritual science, one should have a test to see how far he or she is progressing. He can judge by these items. So now he's going to explain the other items, which the next one is pridelessness. And it says, one should not pose himself as a religionist simply for name and fame. Okay. So this name and fame, or pratishta, is a very dangerous thing, because if one seeks to be honored all the time, they will become a show bottle so-called pundit. A show bottle pundit is more interested in their own aggrandizement and their own glorification than in glorifying the Lord himself. So, one example of that is the man gods in India, all the man gods or women gods. They're more interested in being worshipped and glorified themselves than Krishna. One example of such a buffoon is this so-called Nityananda. In his temple, it used to be in Bellevue, now it's in Issachar. His picture was above the altar. Did you ever see that? You did? Yeah. His picture is above the altar. That means he's superior to everyone that's in the altar, you see. So this kind of nonsense this is called being puffed up with false pride and being enamored by the pratishta, all the glory and accolades given to such a false person. So that is the sign that one is in a very, very sick state of mentality and has gone to the lowest point that a human being can go to. That is to declare themselves as God. So one should not pose himself as a religionist simply for name and fame. And then number 3, ahimsa. One should not become a source of anxiety to others by the actions of his body, by the thoughts of his mind, or by his words. Everyone should hear this because this is important. Many times people become agitators of others by saying things and doing things that is very hurtful. And one should not become a source of anxiety to others by the actions of his body, by the thoughts of his mind, or by his words. So Prabhupada writes here, so it says, ahimsa. Nonviolence is generally taken to mean not killing or destroying the body, but actually, nonviolence means not to put others into distress. People in general are trapped by ignorance in the material concept of life, and they perpetually suffer material pains. So unless one elevates people to spiritual knowledge, one is practicing violence. One should try his best to distribute real knowledge to the people so that they may become enlightened and leave this material entanglement. That is nonviolence. Wow, so we see there's a whole, let's say, edifice, a grand edifice of what is nonviolence. We don't really understand what is nonviolence. We usually think it's, not hurting the bodies of other living entities. Yes, that is definitely one meaning of nonviolence, but it goes deeper than that. It's not doing anything that puts others into anxiety. Like, for example, sometimes people purposely and enjoy putting other people into anxiety by threatening them. Like there's this one lady that calls up the temple periodically and threatens us. Either she calls me or she calls Namarata. And she just threatens us. She just said, I'm going to go to the law and I'm going to get a lawyer and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. This is their culture. Their culture is to threaten people. Do you know anyone like that? Do you know anyone like that? Yes? You know anyone like that, Prabhu? You know anyone like that? You don't know anyone like that, no? You never get threatened in Microsoft? Huh? Yeah. So we see that some people enjoy threatening others, putting them into anxiety, saying things that makes them anxious and worried, right? And there are a lot of people like that today. That is the whole culture today, is to intimidate people with false accusations or false premises that puts them in anxiety and puts them in fear. Just like, Y2K, the world's coming to the end because all the computers will fail in Y2K. The new year 2000, because they're not calibrated to take into effect the changing of the century. It's all nonsense. Y2K came, nothing happened, right? But people were in anxiety for like 2 or 3 years before that, thinking the whole world's coming to an end. I know a person who had paid off their temple. They mortgaged the temple, took the money, bought gold, and then bought a farm somewhere in New Mexico that didn't have an easement. So they move everything from the temple to that farm, and they illegally pass through other people's property to get to the farm, and those people sued them and forbade them to use their property to access the property that they ignorantly bought without an easement. And in the end, all the money they invested in that farm was lost because there's no easement to it. Easement means access to go through someone else's property to get to your property. And they mortgaged the temple to buy gold, right? And the gold disappeared. Who knows where it went? And the temple was in dire distress for 10 to 15 years after that, trying to pay the bills. This is a crazy thing. This person who was the president of the temple, he actually believed that Y2K was real, but actually it was a hoax. And when you believe something is not true, you're in a state of delusion. You're delusional, and you believe things that are not true, and you do things that are vastly, what you would call, exaggerated, and it causes havoc in people's lives, and causes a lot of anxiety. Okay, so then the next point, Aman Idvamadamiman Ahimsa, Shantir. Shantir is translated as tolerance. And in the Ishopanishad it says, one should learn forbearance even in the face of provocation from others. That is, when someone insults you, you should forbear. Forbear means you tolerate it. You don't get upset. You don't want to, get revenge because they insulted you. It's different if they insult Krishna or the Guru or devotees. Then you must act. But when you're insulted, you should not react to it. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada writes, tolerance means that one should be practiced to bear insult and dishonor from others. If one is engaged in the advancement of spiritual knowledge, there will be so many insults and much dishonor from others. This is expected because material nature is so constituted. Even a boy like Prahlad Maharaj, who only 5 years old, was engaged in the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, was endangered when his father became antagonistic to his devotion. The father tried to kill him in so many ways, but Prahlada tolerated him. So there may be many impediments to making advancement in spiritual knowledge, but we should be tolerant and continue our progress with determination. So these are 18 points of knowledge. Are any of these being taught? No, they're not being taught. A little bit maybe, but not much. This should be looked into very seriously. This is what is real knowledge. See? Because we have a false concept of what is knowledge, we're actually wasting this human life pursuing things that lead to a dead end, to death and rebirth again in the cycle of birth and death. Unless we know what is real knowledge, we are basically victimizing ourselves. You don't have to have another person victimizing you. You become your worst victimizer by purposely avoiding to learn these things. This is all in the Bhagavad Gita. This is in the Ishopanishad, and it's in other places in the Vedas also. But we ignore this, and we should go deeply into this. We should look at this every day and remind ourselves, this is what is real knowledge. The other stuff is not real knowledge. It's just misleading. It just takes us away from Krishna. So, Ishopanishad says, one should learn forbearance even in the face of provocation from others. And in Prabhupada's purport, in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, tolerance means that one should be practiced to bear insult and dishonor from others. And the next point, Amanit Vamadamit Vamahimsa Shantir Arjavam. Arjavam. One should learn to avoid duplicity in his dealings with others. Duplicity means cheating and lying. And this is Arjavam, being straightforward and not lying and cheating and not misrepresenting things. And Prabhupada explains Arjavam, simplicity. Simplicity means that without diplomacy, one should be so straightforward that he can disclose the real truth even to an enemy. As for acceptance of the spiritual master, okay, so there it is right there. He says simplicity means that without diplomacy, one should be so straightforward that he can disclose the real truth even to an enemy. Well, we'll see that some of Lord Chaitanya's closest associates used diplomacy with Lord Chaitanya. So this is in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. But it wasn't to, let's say, cheat the Lord. Like, for example, when Lord Chaitanya was trying to go to Vrindavan, he basically, in a state of ecstasy, got lost, and the devotees led him back to the house of Advaitacharya. So, because they wanted so much to have the association of the Lord. So sometimes devotees may be a little diplomatic in order to help people come closer to Krishna. Right? But in general, one should always speak the truth directly, even to an enemy, and not be intimidated by anyone, and not mislead anyone. So tolerance, to be able to, simplicity or arjavam means that without diplomacy, one should be so straightforward that he can disclose the real truth even to an enemy. And in the Ishopanishad, one should avoid duplicity in his dealings with others. The next, amanitvam, adamitvam, ahimsa, shantir, arjavam, acharya pasamam, number 6. One should search out a bona fide spiritual master who can lead him gradually to the stage of spiritual realization, and one must submit himself to such a spiritual master, render him service, and ask relevant questions. This is Ishopanishad. And in Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada says, as for acceptance of the spiritual master, that is essential, because without the instruction of a bona fide spiritual master, one cannot progress in the spiritual science. One should approach the spiritual master with all humility and offer him all services so that he will be pleased to bestow his blessings upon the disciple. Because a bona fide spiritual master is a representative of Krishna, if he bestows any blessings upon his disciple, that will make the disciple immediately advanced without the disciples following the regulative principles, or the regulative principles will be easier for one who has served the spiritual master without reservation. So we can see the correlation between the understandings of the meanings of these words in the Ishopanishad and the understanding of these words in Bhagavad Gita. But when you compare the two, you get a deeper understanding of what's meant by these words. So, manitvam, adamitvam, ahimsa, santir, arjavam, acharya pasamam. The next, acharya pasamam. So then it says, number 7 is acharya pasamam, socham, cleanliness. Cleanliness means here, and Prabhupada gives a long explanation of it. Cleanliness is essential for making advancement in spiritual life. There are 2 kinds of cleanliness, external and internal. External cleanliness means taking a bath. But for internal cleanliness, one has to think of Krishna always and chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This process cleans the accumulated dust of past karma from the mind. It cleans the dust of accumulated past karma. So that means that whatever we did in a previous life, it's influencing us now. And to clear that away, like who knows what we did in the previous life, but what comes from the previous life is the tendency to be attracted to sense gratification. That always remains. It's called kutam in Sanskrit. So, therefore, what's influencing us from our previous life is the tendency to be attracted to sense gratification in this life. And we see that happen especially at puberty. When a boy or a girl reaches 12, 13, 14 years of age, they suddenly have an awakening of desires that overwhelms them, and they start to become attracted to things that they were not interested at all in when they were kids, when they were younger. But all of a sudden, they get attracted to things. And unfortunately, most of those things are very bad for their spiritual life. Right? And that's from the influence from the previous life. The tendency to be attracted to sense gratification. Say. So, to stop that and purify it, this hearing about Krishna regularly every day and chanting regularly every day, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So it's not only doing your rounds, it's also effectively hearing about Krishna every day from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Some people think it's just the rounds. It's not just the rounds. It's also this hearing. And this is something that many devotees miss. This regular hearing every day. That's extremely important to enable one to stay on track with the chanting. Otherwise, they can just perfunctorily or just mechanically chant. And although there is some benefit by doing that also, but they don't get the full benefit of it because they're just mechanically trying to chant and get the rounds over with, right? So here we see there's a deeper way of understanding these fundamental things. That's what's being explained here. And in the Ishopanishad, it says, number 8, well, it says for accepting spiritual, it says, in order to approach the platform of self-realization, one must follow the regulative principles enjoined in the revealed scriptures. So, that is the understanding of cleanliness. You have to follow the regulative principles, no meat eating, no gambling, and so forth, enjoined in the revealed scriptures. That will lead to cleanliness. So, Amanitvam, Adamitvam, Himsa Sanchir, Arjvam, Acharya Pasavam, Socham, Staryam. Staryam is number 8. It means steadiness. Steadiness means that one should be very determined to make progress in spiritual life. Without such determination, one cannot make tangible progress. And so one should, and then in the Ishopanishad it says, one must be fixed in the tenets of the revealed scriptures. In other words, you must follow the instructions and duties prescribed in the revealed scriptures, and such as following the regulative principles, but not only that, chanting one's rounds, avoiding the association of unholy people. So Lord Chaitanya, the way he defined a devotee, he said, Asat Sangha Tyaga E Vaishnavachar. The devotee is recognized by Asat Sangha Tyaga, giving up the association of unholy people and accepting the association always of rightfully situated devotees. That's how you recognize a devotee. They avoid the association of unholy people. So you might say, well, how can we go in Sankirtan? Because everybody we meet is unholy. Well, that's different. You're not going to associate with them. You're going to give them your association, right? On your terms, not on their terms, right? Well, let's say someone invites you to, someone who doesn't follow regulative principles, invites you to have dinner. And when you go, you see that everyone at the table is eating meat. You're the only one not eating meat, So that type of association you should avoid. Because to sit there and watch them savor the taste of meat is actually degrading. It actually influences your mind to see such things. And therefore, one should not watch anything that is degrading, movies or this or that, whatever. Okay, so one must be fixed in the tenets of the revealed scriptures, or steadiness means that one should be very determined to make progress in spiritual life. Without such determination, one cannot make tangible progress. Okay, the next point. Amanitvamadam himsa santarajam acharya pasama socham staryam atma vinigraha. So atma vinigraha means one should be, it means self-controlled. Self-control means that one should not accept anything which is detrimental to the path of spiritual progress. One should become accustomed to this and reject anything which is against the path of spiritual progress. This is real renunciation. And Prabhupada writes here, one should refrain, in the Ishopanishad, one should refrain completely from practices which are detrimental to the interest of self-realization. So, what are those practices? There are many. Going to unsavory web pages, seeing movies that are just about nonsense, and reading books that are all gobbledygook nonsense, and listening to lectures that are all full of nonsense, and so forth. So this completely refrain from practices which are detrimental to the interest of self-realization. Like, for example, sometimes people will go on the internet and they'll receive a dare. You know what a dare is? It's not a bear, it's not a deer. Someone will dare you. I dare you to hold your breath for 2 minutes, right? So there are children who died doing that. They went on the internet, and they meet someone on the internet, and all of a sudden they say, well, I dare you to hold your breath for 2 minutes, and they hold their breath 2 minutes, and they suffocate and they die. Did you know this happens? Have you ever heard about that? Huh? Similar things, right. So this is a type of nonsense that goes on the internet, say. And children who are the least educated to understand what the internet is, you give them free access to the internet, you're actually giving them the key to go to hell. You're giving them the key to go to hell by doing that, because they're not practiced, they're not taught to be careful about all the different pitfalls there are on the internet, and all the dangerous people are on the internet. It's extremely dangerous. Some of the worst people in the world are trolling the internet to find innocent kids who unwittingly are going to here and there in different web pages, and they meet all kinds of crazy people pretending to be someone that they're not, in order to entrap these young kids, or not only young kids, but anybody, and to make them victims of their perverted desires. So it's like giving a kid a loaded gun. Just 2 days ago, a loaded gun was given into the hands of this actor. It was a really low-class person. And they said, the bullets are not real. And he was acting, and he shot someone and killed him because there was a real bullet in the gun. Did you read about that? Yeah. You see, it's the same thing. You give a kid complete access to the internet. It's like giving them a loaded gun and saying, well, there's no bullet, and you can put it on your head like this and pull the trigger, right? And that's crazy. Why would you ever do a thing like that? So, number 9, one should completely refrain from the practices which are detrimental to the interests of self-realization. Okay. And then Atma Vinigraha, the one we're discussing now. One should not accept more than he requires for the maintenance of the body. And then number 10 says, one should become accustomed, let's see, The senses are so strong that they are always anxious to have sense gratification. One should not cater to these demands, which are not necessary. The senses should only be gratified to keep the body fit so that one can discharge his duty in advancing in spiritual life. The most important and uncontrollable sense is the tongue. Okay, so, and it says, if one can control the tongue, then there is every possibility of controlling the other senses. The function of the tongue is to taste and to vibrate. Therefore, by systematic regulation, the tongue should be always engaged in tasting the remnants of foodstuffs offered to Krishna and chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. As far as the eyes are concerned, they should not be allowed to see anything but the beautiful form of Krishna. That will control the eyes. Similarly, the ears should be engaged in hearing about Krishna, and the nose in smelling the flowers offered to Krishna. This is the process of devotional service, and it is understood here that Bhagavad Gita is simply expounding the science of devotional service. All this is the science of devotional service. These 18 points of knowledge is the science of how to perform devotional service. Devotional service is the main and sole objective. Unintelligent commentators on the Bhagavad Gita try to divert the mind of the reader to other subjects, but there is no other subject in Bhagavad Gita than devotional service. This is extremely interesting. And when are we going to study this very carefully? Because without this clear understanding of what is knowledge, we are going to be fooled and waste our life chasing after things that are actually very, very detrimental for us. Very detrimental. Okay, next point. Amanitvam, adamitvam, ahimsa santir arjavam, acharya pasamam socham staryam, akva vinigraha. Renunciation of the objects of sense gratification. One should not accept more than he requires for the maintenance of the body. This is called minimalism. You live a minimalist life. You only accept those things that are absolutely essential for maintaining body and soul together. And you avoid overindulgence in anything that is beyond what your minimal needs are. So, one can, apply this principle to eating. One should not overeat. You'll just get sick, And it's like, for example, people who get diabetes, usually it's because they overeat and they especially are addicted to sweets. And therefore, just like sometimes, parents who give too many sweets to their young kids, at one point the kid refuses to eat vegetables and just wants to eat, at the most, rice and sweet things. And it's a shame. I mean, a lot of people nowadays have learned, not to give any sweets to their kids until a certain age when they can learn to control it. And they just because a kid will accept whatever you give normally. I've seen kids that haven't been given sweets eat things that normally we would consider, not very tasty at all. But they don't know. They just get adapted to whatever you're giving them. So to keep them off of sweets early in life is a good thing. Many kids who are who have learning disabilities and who are late developers are addicted to sweets. And it just aggravates their agitation when they eat them. They become hyper by eating too many sweets. So this is something that is just normally happens out of ignorance. So of course, Vaishnavas like sweets. So, but overindulgence in them is not a good thing. So one has to learn restraint. Just like here it says, one should not accept more than he requires for the maintenance of the body. And Prabhupada, purport in the Bhagavad Gita says, yeah, well, I read it already. In other words, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the skin, they should all be regulated to minimal needs, not overindulgence. Okay. And then number 11, it says the false ego. And in each Upanishad it says, one should not falsely identify himself with the gross material body, nor should one consider those who are related to his body to be his own. Well, we can understand the first part. One should not consider himself or identify himself falsely with the gross material body. But then it says, nor should one consider those who are related to his body to be his own. Well, many people would object to this. They see, this is what we knew about Krishna consciousness. They're teaching our kids not to like their family, not to respect their parents, to ignore them, and not to be attached to their brothers and sisters and their relatives. No, that's not what it's saying. But it sounds like that. What it's saying is, if you're not attached to your body and you don't identify with your body, then you understand that you should not be attached to the body of your relatives, but you should be attached to the soul. That's what it actually means. If you're not going to identify with the body, what are you going to identify with? You should identify with the soul, not the body, and the soul's relationship to Krishna. And therefore, when you look at other people, it could be your family members or anybody, you see that they have also the same relationship with Krishna. That's what it actually means. But of course, the people who want to jump to find some reason to reject Krishna consciousness, they say, oh, now we know what Krishna consciousness is all about. It's all about hating your family, and not respecting your family. No, that's not what it's about. It's about seeing the soul and its relationship to Krishna, not only in yourself, but in others also, including your family members. That's what it actually means, right? And therefore, acting on the level of the soul and not on the level of the body. So this is a hard thing for people to understand, but this is the truth. As long as we identify with the body, we have false ego. Like, for example, when I was born, I immediately had enemies. Even when I was a little baby. Those enemies were the enemy of my family, race, or my ethnicity. And therefore, I inherited dushman, or enemies, not by doing anything. I didn't do anything to them, right? But they became my natural enemies due to my identification with my body, the family, and my ethnicity, and my nationality, or my whatever. So this is a sick thing. It makes people do crazy things. It causes hatred, it causes suspicion, it causes all kinds of problems, this bodily identification. And it happens right at birth. You're born into a certain family, you immediately inherit the enemies of that family, right? Or that ethnic group, or that race, or that nationality. So, therefore, one should not falsely identify himself with the gross material body, nor should one consider those who are related to his body to be his own. And in the Bhagavad Gita it says, false ego means accepting the body as oneself. When one understands that he is not his body and a spirit soul, he comes to his real ego. Ego is there. False ego is condemned, but not real ego. In the Vedic literature, Brihad Aranyakya Upanishad 1.4.10, it is said, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, I am spirit. This I am, the sense of self, also exists in the liberated states of self-realization. This sense of I am is ego, But when the sense of I am is applied to this false body, it is the false ego. When the sense of self is applied to reality, that is real ego. There are some philosophers who say we should give up our ego. What do you mean some philosophers? Almost all of them, all the Mayavadis say, give up ego. How are you going to give up ego? That's who you are. Ego means I am, right? So I am a product of matter, that's false ego. I am spirit soul, that's real ego. They want you to give up all ego. See? It's just like someone says, oh, don't drink milk, it's bad for you. Become a vegan. Right? Is all milk bad for you? No. Ahimsa milk is not bad for you. It's actually good for you. Right? Maybe the milk from the Western cows or milk that has been, just like in India, in order to make extra money, they add water to the milk. And then to make more money, they figured out that they can just get chalk, which is white, mix it with water, and it looks like milk. And for people who are ignorant, they sell it to them, and they're not drinking real milk. They're drinking chalk with water. So the more greedy they get, the more water they put in. And then the greediest ones, they don't even put milk in it. They just put chalk. You know, it just looks like it. Just like the Chinese, they also make plastic rice. And they sell it. They sell it in Africa, and they sell it all over the place, you know, to dumb people who think, you know, oh, it's very cheap. Yeah, the cheaper it is, believe me, the worse it is. So there's nothing more expensive than the cheapest, and there's nothing least expensive as the most expensive. Because when you buy something of high quality, you only have to buy it once. It can last for a long time, maybe a whole lifetime. And you buy something cheap, it doesn't last very long. So this is what happened to American car industry. They started making the cars cheaper and cheaper to make more and more money. And finally, the Americans figured out that the cars made in Japan are better than the cars made in the United States, because the cars made in the United States, they purposely started making them so they would fall apart in a few years. So they'd have to buy another car. But they didn't figure that the Japanese were making cars that could last the whole lifetimes. And people gradually understood that. That's why now the Japanese cars are more popular than the American cars. See? So whenever you cheat, eventually you cheat yourself. See? So the ones, people who are saying, you know, dalda is good, ghee is bad. Well, yeah, they cheated the people 50, 60 years. Now the truth came back again, that ghee is good for you and dalda is bad. See? So don't cheat anybody, because you'll end up cheating yourself ultimately. So therefore it says, one should always remember that as long as he has a material body, he must face the miseries of repeated birth, old age, disease, and death. There is no use in making plans to get rid of these miseries of the material body. The best course is to find out the means by which one may regain his spiritual identity and immortality, basically, is saying. Right? So this is number 12. Number 12 is the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease. The evil. This is actually evil. Today, we're being taught that, well, this is just normal. You know, this is just a normal way of life. You're born, you eat, you sleep, you mate, you defend, and then you get old, and you get sick, and you die. That's just life. You just have to accept it. So they have all these atheists say, well, I'm not afraid of death like all you Christians and people that believe in God. You know, I'm not afraid of death. Yeah, and then when they die, they see Yamarites and they pee in their pants. You know, so this is nonsense. One should see the evil of birth, old age, disease, and death. These are bad things. They're not good things. They're not normal. This is punishment. See? And unless we see like that, we won't even try and change it. We'll just accept it. You know, this is just a normal thing to die, right? And okay, so I'll continue this tomorrow. because we have only got to point 12. But you see, it's very effective to read this and hear it and understand this is real knowledge, and anything besides this is nonsense. It's just going to take us away from what is essential for our existence as an eternal soul. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Bol. Some people think it's better not to come to class. I don't have to hear all this stuff. You know, it's scary. I won't be able to do nonsense if I hear this. Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma Bando Mui Sabadana Mate Bando Mui Savadana Mate. You chant? You want to chant?
I need to see him.
Yeah, okay. Give her the words. Here. Okay. Give her the microphone.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhagati Sadma
Shri Guru Charana Kevala Bhakti Satma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhagati Sadma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma
Bando Mui Savadana Mate
Bando Mui Sabadana Mate
Bando Mui Savadana Mate
Bando Mui Sabadana Mate
Jahara Prasade Bhai E Bhava Toriya Jaye
Janara Prasade Bhai He Bhava Toriya Jai
Krishna Prapti Hoye Jaha Hote
Bhakti Hoya Te
Krishna Prapti Hoye Jaha Hote
Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chite Koriya Aika
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya chite koriya
arna koriyo mane asha
arna koriyo mane asa
Shri Guru charane rati ehi se utama gati
Shri Guru charane ati aise uttama gati
je prasade pure sarve asha
Ye prasade pure sarvasa
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
चक्षुदान दिला जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
चक्षुदान दिला जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशित
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो
प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जते
प्रेम भक्ति होते अविद्या विनाश जते
प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जते
प्रेम भक्ति होते अविद्या विनाश जते
वेद के जहाँ रचरित
जन रचयितो
श्री गुरु चरुणा सिंधु अधम जनर बंधु
श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अदन जनर बंधु
श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अधम जनर बंधु
गुरु करुणा सिंधु अदन जनर बंधु
लोकना लोकेरा जीवाना
लोकेना लोकेरा जीवाना
लोकना लोकेरा जीवाना
लोकेना लोकेरा जीवाना
आहा प्रभु कोरो दया देहो मोरे पदा छाया
आहा प्रभु कोरा दया दे मोरे पदशया
आहा प्रभु कोरो दया देहो मोरे पदा छाया
आहा प्रभु कोरा दया दे मोरे पदशया
ए बेजा सागु सुखु त्रिभाना
Ebe ask Shakti Bhuvana
ए बेजा सागु सुखु त्रिभाना
Ebe ask Shakti Bhuvana
नमो विष्णु पदाया कृष्ण प्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांता स्वामीति नामिने
Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine
नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवाणी पाश्चात्तादिशतारिणे
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesa Sunyavadi Paskadya Desatarine
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंदा
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda
Nityananda
Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya
Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada
Jaya Jaya Gurudev Gurudev Jaya Jaya Gurudev
Jaya Jaya Gurudev Gurudev Jaya Jaya
Jai Srila
Gurudev
Prabhupada ki jai Jai Gurudev ki jai
Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pararajikacharasta Tadasatarishi Shishimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vinda ki jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai Prem Shri Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaura Bhaktavinda ki jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai Shri Mayapura Dham ki jai Shri Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai Tulasi Devi ki jai Bhakti Devi ki jai Ganga Maya ki jai Jamuna Maya ki jai Samavela Bhaktavinda ki jai Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, Patita Bhavani ki jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhuta Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Tinamani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Pacharani Nirvisesu Sunyori Paskati Dasatani. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great honor and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic emanates. By him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the Lord. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all the three worlds. We take shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutili Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Gaurvani Pacharani